What was your worst job interview? Story 1. I took vacation days to interview, bought my own plane ticket, and paid for my own hotel. First thing the interviewer said was, "I have no intention of hiring you. This is just a courtesy because I knew your brother." I had 8 more hours left in my interview day. It was painful. They ended up offering me the position many weeks down the road because they couldn't fill the position. I politely declined and got a very passive-aggressively worded survey to fill out explaining why I passed. Edit: I'm an eye surgeon. This was for a training position at an Ivy League institution. Story 2. During college I applied for a bunch of jobs at IKEA. I got an interview followed by a rejection email. A week later they called me for another interview. I got another rejection email. They interviewed 5 times for 5 different positions. I got rejected all 5 times. I'm still salty about it 2 decades later. Story 3. I had a really big opportunity for a job with Siemens Corporation sometime after I graduated from college for a technical job that would have paid a lot of money. It was a multi-interview job and I actually got interviewed by 3 different people. Each one I was a nervous wreck but somehow nailed them and just stayed confident. Finally they send me for the final interview at their headquarters, so I show up prepared, early, suit and tie, certs and paperwork, etc. I'm sitting in this fancy lobby waiting for the interviewer to come get me, and another dude walks in dressed for an interview just like me. I figure he was here for another job, so we had a friendly chat while we waited for our interviewers to show up. This was clearly an older, more experienced guy. Finally interviewer shows up and is surprised to see us, saying they accidentally scheduled our interviews for the same time. So he takes the older gentleman and tells his employee to take me and we would be interviewed separately. At this point everything is falling apart. I'm not being interviewed by the man I showed up to talk to. Instead this employee dressed in a t-shirt takes me downstairs to the cafeteria and asks me a handful of quick questions in a very unprofessional setting before letting me go. It's like they decided who to hire before the interview even began. It was a huge letdown. Story 4. The interviewer was just stone cold. I tried to work in some small chit-chat to break the ice, but the most I got was a smirk. Then came the technical questions. I botched every question, and each time he gave me a hard no, then proceeded to condescendingly explain why I was wrong. Luckily, I landed a job with a different company shortly after, but man, that interview really destroyed my confidence. Story 5. As an interviewee, it was when I applied to a job as a junior programmer, and in 5 minutes the guy goes, "Look, you'll be honest. There is no job, you can get an internship, no pay, we offer the bus pass." As an interviewer, we posted a job opening for a senior programmer. This kid, right out of university, applied. I turned him down, but my boss made me interview him. I told him what the job was, what the expectations and technologies were, and the kid turns, stares at me and says, "Don't care about that. I want to be a project manager, and within 2 or 3 years top I expect to be offered a middle management position." I turned to my boss and told him to take it from there. Story 6. Fresh out of college, I was looking for my first teaching job. I applied at a small district for an elementary school position. I walked in, expecting the principal and a few teachers. Instead I had the superintendent of the district, some high-level admin, and every single elementary school principal in the district. Probably 15 people in all. They peppered me with questions for 45 minutes. I had 0 experience, just my student teaching. I did not get the job. Story 7. Wanted to work at HM. Got interviewed by the worst person ever. One question was, and I am legit not lying, "What is your favorite color and why?" I answered baby blue because it's calming and not too harsh to the eyes. My interviewer then said, "Oh sorry, red is what we were looking for," and then proceeded to show me the exit. Story 8. Finished up a master's degree in physics. Got a phone interview and was told it would be an introductory chat. Was confronted with a technical interview panel over the phone of 6 PhDs, 4 of which had graduated from the research group I had just left. We walked through my research project in about 10 minutes, then the pain began. Felt like I'd only learned kindergarten physics. Story 9. My mom raises chickens, and during COVID one of them got sick. Not COVID. She had it inside to feed water hourly to try to nurse it back to life. My mom has to run an errand, so I'm in charge of this chicken for the afternoon. I was on a phone screening with a candidate for a position in my office, and this chicken starts having a seizure and dies on the middle of this phone call. I look over and it's laying almost like it was crucified. The candidate heard the commotion and asked if everything was okay, which I relied, "Yeah, the chicken just died." She withdrew her application the next morning. Edit: it was an office job at a NYC school. No farm experience required. Poor girl. Story 10. Applied to work at a vet clinic. Veterinarian did the interview while spaying a cat. Apparently one of the cleanest and quickest surgeries they do. I fainted. Was not offered the job after I woke up. Story 11. Partway through the interview the boss lady had something come up and got her assistant to show me around while she was busy. As soon as we were out of earshot this guy tells me to get out while I can. Apparently the boss was a slave driver on a sinking ship, and either that was true and I should leave, or this guy is insane and I should leave. So in the second part of the interview I declined the offer. That set the boss off like a firework, which made me think the guy's warning was sincere. It was the first time I'd turned down a job and felt kinda empowering, so her venom didn't stick, and I had a strawberry milk waiting for me outside that topped it off. Story 12. Interviewed someone for a server's position in a club. She said she couldn't work weekends or past 8 p.m. We're a nightclub that's open from 7 p.m. till 2 a.m. Story 13. Dude showed up 35 minutes late for his own interview. I wanted to just cancel it and tell him too bad, but my big boss told me to go ahead since we really needed the position filled. Interview starts and he tells us he can only stay for 10 minutes since he's on call at his other job while here with us and that technically he's supposed to be no more than 10 minutes away from his site, which is an hour away. I asked him what he'll do if he gets a call while he's at the interview. Oh, I always just turn the phone off and pretend there's bad service. Story 14:1. I walked in as the HR lady farted too. It was a small office with no Windows 3. I asked her questions about their employee retention rate that she couldn't answer for. The stayed the duration of the interview 5. I hope they got the job, because I didn't want it. Story 15. I applied for a job in a planetarium. The interview was conducted in a big dome. Problem was, another part of the planetarium staff was doing fire alarm tests during the interview. The dome amplified the sound so much, it was deafening. The interview staff acted like nothing was going on. We had to shout so we could hear each other. Story 16. I showed up in person for a phone interview. I have no idea how I got myself in that position. I looked up the address on my own and everything. I sat around waiting to be interviewed for 12 hours because the interviewer was in his office trying to call me. Of course, my phone was off. I wasn't offered another interview, and rightfully so. Story 17. A couple hours into the interview intro training, I was given paperwork to fill out for my new dog grooming job, which would have been great except that I had applied to be a cashier and had never owned a dog, much less groomed one. When I brought that up to the trainers, they didn't seem concerned at all. They said there were no cashier slots, that opening must have been left up by mistake, but dog grooming is fun and I'd like it. They seemed surprised when I left the paperwork on the table and congratulated them on wasting all of our time. Never shopped at that pet store again either. Story 18. Got an interview for a job as a floor manager at a gigantic steel foundry. I have some background in metallurgy so I thought it fit. It paid $90K and I was qualified resume-wise. I got there. Turned out it was a group interview with 3 other applicants, to hear the pitch. If something messes up, the company loses $100,000, some shockingly high amount. I don't remember if it was exactly $100K per hour, and it's your sole responsibility to fix it. They said you'd have to be on call 24/7 to handle anything that comes up. I got to the solo part out of curiosity, and the interviewer they put me with said something to the effect of I know this job sounds bad, but actually it's even worse. I was desperate for a job because I didn't land one straight out of college, but I was glad not to hear back from them after the interview. Story 19. Interviewed someone for a call center job, and when we got to the salary part, he takes out his phone, calls his mother, and puts her on speakerphone to help negotiate his salary like he was getting a job in the C-suite. Did not get hired. Story 20. I graduated college in 09, so I had a terrible time finding a job. I applied all kinds of menial jobs and would never hear back. I once followed up on an application at Walmart. They said my app was probably at the back of the pile and they just worked top to bottom and hired someone else. I was not in a good place. I found a small local book publisher and got an interview. It was for like an assistant, nothing big, but seemed interesting. I kind of fell apart after struggling to answer your greatest weakness. I was just honest and said I'm not the most traditionally organized person. I don't let it affect my work, but it is what it is. This clearly was the wrong thing to say to one of the women interviewing me. Later in the interview they asked me if I had good attention to detail. I said I was solid, if not extraordinary at it. This other woman goes in on me because I said I was unorganized and that I couldn't have attention to detail if I wasn't organized. I knew they weren't going to hire me so I defended myself vigorously. We were in a heated discussion just shy of a verbal fight. It was just an awful experience at an awful time in my life. Story 21. Was doing the whole long-term unemployed thing. Applied for a job that was being advertised by a recruiter. Surprisingly, got an interview. When I got there it quickly became clear to me that they were asking questions I didn't understand about things I'd never done. Now when I decide to point this out to them, the interviewer naturally asks why I listed them on my CV if I never had experience with them. The answer of course, is that I didn't. The interview has a copy of my CV on the table that shows these particular skills listed out on it. Now I'm quite surprised at this because the copy of my CV emailed to the recruiter doesn't have these particularly skills on it, and I naturally show that copy to them. I was the third person that day who obviously didn't know what they were talking about, and the first to actually admit it. This did not lead to a job, as I was missing the skills I'd actually need to do the job at all. It did lead to a free lunch and the bus fare home, which was nice. Story 22. My first interview after graduating college with an econ accounting degree. When the interviewer asked about my expected salary, he literally laughed and told me that I would not be able to get that starting salary anywhere and told me what I should be grateful for. I literally found a job that following week that paid what I was seeking. Know your worth, then add tax, get what you deserve. Story 23. Interviewer. We were hiring a new graduate from a technical school. One of the engineering partners and I chatted with her for 15 minutes before 2 other partners and the director showed up. The initial 15 were great. She was relaxed, competent, at ease. But when you have 6 interviewers in the room, some of whom are being tough because they think they are supposed to be, it's a little intimidating. She ended up crying because one question ended up being unusually personal. She took 2 minutes to recover and compose herself and carried on like a champ. I wanted to hire her. Tears of anger and frustration are a thing for women in construction and engineering. I've had my share over the years. The fact she can back calm and composed and still address questions well spoke highly of her abilities to me. The guys just saw the tears and said nope. Second worst. The interviewee explained she was just looking for a summer job. We should have ended the conversation then. We weren't interested. my boss went on and on about how she should travel over the summer, to a woman who needed work to put herself through college, WTF. Story 24. I was 23 at the time. The manager of the company interviewed me. He was old enough to be my grandfather. He asked if I had and if he was jealous. He told me that there were going to be the options for me. The first one was to work from home. The second one was to work from the office. The third one was to go on business trips with him twice a week. The 3D option was with the highest pay. He told me that I looked like a smart girl and the third option would be the best for me. It was clear he was hiring a personal escort. He was such a creep and made me feel so uncomfortable. Story 25. Went for an interview with Oxygen magazine. Front desk lady, very shocked to see me, asked me to sit and hurried off. Hiring manager came out and she too was shocked to see me, asked to see my resume, hands me a name tag with my last name, only on it it's a common female name. She has me sit in the conference room while the CEO and CTO come back with hiring manager. They explained that they thought I was a female and apologized for the mix-up on the name tag, then explained I was not a fit for their office culture and ended interview without a single question offered or answered. About then I noticed the entire office was female. I wasn't even mad, just kinda laughed and left. Gotta be the worst one in terms of professionalism. Story 26. I interviewed for a programmer position. They asked me to bring in a sample of a program ID written. I brought in a simple DBase 3.1 on a disk, just dated myself. Note the program itself was simple, but I was very good at documenting notating my code, so it looked very complex when you opened up the program and looked at the code itself. They gave the disk to their current programmer guy to check it out. He took it out of the room. I continue interviewing very well with the manager. Then their guy comes back and flings literally the disk across the desk back to me and says, "You didn't write this. There's no way a secretary could do this." It's true I was a secretary at the time, but I had read various teach-yourself programming books, taken classes and written programs as I wanted to get into IT. I absolutely did write that program. The manager and I were just dumbstruck looking back and forth to him then at each other. The poor manager was so embarrassed. I explained that I did write it. He kept insisting I couldn't have. I gathered my things, stood up, thanked her for the interview, but told her I didn't think I'd be a good fit for their environment. In other words, you've gotten a working for you and I want no part of being around him. Story 27. I once had an interview where they asked me questions word for word from the online application I filled out to apply. Are you legally authorized to work in the United States for any employer? Do you have 0 to 2 years experience using software? And so on. Another fun one. One company brought me on site for an interview. This was last April when we were still in full pandemic mode. Literally half of the time was spent on the phone talking to interviewers who were working from home. Story 28. I once had an interview that asked really personal questions, i.e. are your parents divorced and were you bullied in school? The interview was for really small, sketchy business with 4 or 5 interviewers and last around 2 hours. I'm glad I didn't get the job. Story 29. I've had a few of these receptionist hiring manager had to cancel, so you'll be interviewing with some flunky. Then you are interviewed by some flunky who has never interviewed anyone before, and hasn't seen your resume, and he is more nervous than you are. When this happens I assume they've already selected someone else, and certainly aren't serious about the interview. Story 30. As a college grad I applied for a graphic design position. Before I got to the interview I had to take an online test, basic math and English. When I got there, the interviewer set me up in a tiny broom closet with a desk. He handed me a paper booklet as you'd get in school for a standardized test and a 2 pencil. I asked if the test was standard for everyone before they interviewed. He asked me to break the seal and then he started to initial each page. Interviewer, as he started to initial the pages, yeah, we have a lot of college kids apply. It's basically a revolving door around here, so we want to make sure we're at least hiring competent people. So everyone takes the same test. Me, what's with the initials? We started doing this to prevent cheating. Me, has that been an issue in the past? People try to get their friends hired and slip them the test in advance. His tone really shifted and his body language got tight and it made me super uncomfortable. And you know what? I don't think this is going to be a good fit for me. I appreciate your time, and I got up and started walking away. He got huffy. How would you know? You haven't even interviewed yet. But you know what? With that kind of attitude I'm going to ask you to leave. I couldn't help but laugh a little and it enraged him. Get out of here. As I'm already back out into the lobby. Dogged a huge bullet. Story 31. Guy stared at me the whole time. Asked me how old I was, what my credentials were, told me I seemed young to be a director, and then said, "Are there even any men on this team?" I was the one doing the interviewing, by the way. Story 32. Applied for a programmer job with a company that wrote insurance industry software, had 3 different interviews with different people on different days, was told to come in on Monday at 8 a.m., quit my day job, reported on Monday, "Hi, what's up, reporting for duty." I mean, it's one thing to string somebody on, letting them think they're accepted, or you can say, "Well, give you a call," and figure they'll get the message. But when you tell someone to report for work, then pretend you didn't have a job for them, that's lame. Story 33. Not an interview but applications. My boss was looking to hire someone new. He had me go through CVs to take out any that didn't have the right education level before he'd even looked through them. Someone had set their CV out on a Microsoft PowerPoint slide and included a photo of themselves in the top corner. I'd seen quite a few like this, but it was a female applicant who had used the most revealing cleavage photo where she clearly on holiday 20 face 80. She had the right education level, but one look at the front page and he just handed it back to me with a no. It was a really high-end company in central London and the job was finance-related. I'm unsure why she thought this photo would class her as the perfect candidate. Story 34 door-to-door coupon book sales. Dude asked me like 2 questions then started getting ready for a team meeting in the next room. They had music blasting and he starts shadowboxing, bobbing and weaving and throwing punches like a madman. Then he goes into the next room and everybody is cheering like he was a conquering hero. I was like, FFS, it's just coupon books. Job lasted a week. Story 35 My friend worked at an indie video game company and referred me to the project director as an environment artist. He hooked me up with an application and a quick phone interview that went well, but when it came to the on-site interview, red flags everywhere. Firstly, I arrived 10 minutes early. Or as job counselors would say, 5 minutes late. However, the director showed up to their own scheduled interview 20 minutes late. No, not 20 minutes late to 15 minutes early counselor speak. I mean literally 20 minutes late. And yet they chastised me for showing up so early, and told me you wouldn't have had to wait so long if you showed up on time to your job interview. Yeah, that's not what showing up on time to your job interview means. Secondly, they had me do an at-home art test prior to the interview. They gave me 3 days to draw concepts, model and texture an entire village. This on top of a full-time job I already had, so I stayed up until 3 to 4 a.m. just getting that done. They weren't impressed with it, saying that it looked like I only spent a couple hours on the whole thing. When I assured them that I was actually up super late and only getting 4 hours of sleep a night, the director said, a whole 4 hours. I guess you'll learn that if you do a real good day's work, that's a lot. Yeah, that's not what a real good day's work means. Lastly, midway through my interview, the lead programmer who was sitting in just fell asleep. He tipped his head down and was out. I asked the director if he was okay, but the director says he's been working 2 days straight without sleep. He's fine. Yeah, that's not what he's fine means. I'd already made up my mind that this place just wasn't a good place for, well, not just me, but anybody really. I was wrapping up my answers in quick snips and just pushing along to the inevitable conclusion so I could go about my day, but the meeting didn't even end gracefully. The director didn't give me the expected well thank you for your time, well put you on file courtesy spiel. He just did. Tells me well you don't seem like you're a hard enough worker for us, then added the most thing I've ever heard in an interview, it doesn't sound like you're cut out for the games industry. Perhaps you should try applying for coding positions in the medical field. Yeah, got learned to code at a job interview. Even worse, all he had to do was look at my resume to realize I was gainfully employed at a large games publisher for 3 years. And here he was, telling me I couldn't do a job that I've been doing longer than his fledgling startup even existed. My friend lost his job there a few months later. Apparently, the company's main financier pulled out. And by financier, I mean the director's rich billionaire oil baron father, who felt that his son had enough playtime in the States with his silly game company fantasy. But now it was time to come back home to Morocco. The director just disappears on a one-way international flight without warning, and the whole company shuttered. The employees were locked out of the building before they could grab anything off the servers, and despite promises they would get copies of their work for their portfolios, the copies never came. Apparently, the director wiped and sold all the backup servers for dirt cheap before leaving. So honestly, I'm not mad I didn't get the job. Heck, I'm not mad the interview went so poorly. I hate to imagine if they were diplomatic, sympathetic, or had reasonable standards on their applicants, I might have actually ended up working at a place that so royally screwed their employees. The 2008 crash happened right after they shuttered, so my friend found himself struggling to find work in a closed field with absolutely nothing to show for his last 2 years of work. Story 36 When I applied to medical school, one of the application essays had a prompt that asked us what we would do if we did not get into medical school. I wrote that I would go to law school and become a lawyer specializing in prosecuting medical malpractice. I ended up getting an interview and had a good laugh about it with one of the interviewers. Did not get into that medical school. Story 37 As an applicant, I took a 50-mile train journey only to be told the job was part-time. The ad definitely said it was full-time. Interviewer got weirdly defensive when I said that was a deal-breaker, acting like I was a subordinate and getting really when I stopped being deferential. Also, I have traveled 200 miles to an interview which, I found out on the day, required a presentation. They emailed about that part, but thanks to spam filters it never arrived. That was totally my fault. On reflection, I did think it was weird I hadn't been asked to do one but failed to put 2 and 2 together in time. Story 38 From the interviewer perspective, guy refused to directly answer any question. His vague answers led me to believe all of his accomplishments on his resume were lies, and never once made eye contact. From the interviewee perspective, engineering position at Apple, where the person got progressively more upset at me answering his weirdly specific questions correctly. He decided early on he didn't like me and was trying to get me to fail the interview by asking these oddly specific questions. Story 39 It was at a call center operating in some very sketchy offices. Everyone was dressed in suits including the reps and had a smile that I can only describe as how I imagine a mannequin would smile. I was young and had only had one over-the-table job before Sundays, so I ignored that it felt off until the person conducting the interview said, "Well, discuss pay after you've worked here for a week or 2, that was one red flag too many, and I bolted out of there. My father is a union man, so even an inexperienced young man like me knew that was up, and nothing good would come from staying a second longer than I needed. Story 40 I thought I was a good cook. I had worked at a 24-hour diner for Christ's sake. I interviewed for a sous chef position at the local country club. This dude head chef was ruthless. He sensed my fear in realizing this job was way over my head. He berated me with question after question that I had absolutely no clue what the answers were. I believe two factors led to this. I didn't think the shitty country club in my town would have such standards. He was miserable that he worked in a kitchen of a country club that also happened to be a double-wide trailer. Story 41 applied for a driver job that was advertised as 8 to 4. It was a max 3, 5-ton vehicle my license is good for. Had a test drive and was fine. Got through the rest of the interview. Got offered the job to start the following Monday. As I started signing all the documents, the salary was lower, hours longer, and was told that it was to deliver dismantled sheds for all over the UK and that I'd be staying in hotels Monday to Friday. I just walked out. Story 42 I had a job interview. I was really nervous about it, and when I get nervous I start to feel a bit nauseous. I arrived a bit early, spoke to the receptionist who said the interviewer was running a bit late but could I please take a seat. I sat down, I waited and waited, and waited some more, and I started to feel not great. I stood up to go grab a glass of water, happened to look down at the chair, and it turns out my nausea wasn't just interview nerves. I have endometriosis, and my period has always been highly unpredictable, at best, so I panicked. I took the cushion off the chair, tucked it under my arm with my handbag, and ran out of the building and all the way to my car, cried in my car for a bit, and stopped for drive-through ice cream on my way home. Story 43 This happened a couple of weeks ago. I went into the interview having been told to prepare for questions about my work experience. The guy didn't ask a single question. Instead he went on the aggressive and started ripping into my CV, telling me I'd lied on my personal statement because you clearly aren't motivated if you haven't worked in a year, and don't use the pandemic as an excuse. He only stopped when I started crying so hard I could no longer speak clearly on the phone. I applied for multiple jobs that never called me back. I live in a town where jobs aren't particularly easy to come by if you don't have experience, and I thought it was common knowledge that a huge number of local entry-level employers haven't been hiring due to COVID. Moreover, he never even bothered to ask me if I was at risk or not, but I do live with an adult who's a carer for someone vulnerable or had been working on any kind of personal development project while I'd been out of work. The hiring process did proceed a little bit past that point because I was desperate, but the moment he started trying to get free work out of me was the moment I turned my back. Luckily I had a much better interview today with a different employer and got the job. Story 44 When I was 21, I finally got an interview at a bookstore chain after striking out at a lot of other places. The man interviewing me was so creepy. He spent most of the time explaining the dating policy to me, and how we could get in trouble if we dated. Then, he went on about this movie, Black Snake Moan, that he thought I'd really enjoy. I wanted to walk out of the room, but really needed the job so I just cried through most of the interview. Story 45 Applied for a job at a company that makes phone games. The job was described as taking YA-published books and turning them into choose-your-own-adventure click-through stories. I was asked to send in writing examples involving young adults and teen friendships. The specific app one would be working for was not mentioned. I got to the in-person interview and very quickly discovered that it was basically choose-your-own scene. They worked exclusively with romance novels and put the racier choices behind a paywall. This was before these types of apps became super popular and were advertised everywhere. Watching them try and explain the job to me without calling it self-insertion was wild. No judgment to anyone who writes for or likes those apps, but it was 100 false advertising and not what I was expecting. Most awkward interview ever once I realized. Story 46 I had a kid fall asleep during an interview. I was a store manager and got called out for a customer service issue. I was gone 5 minutes and I come back and he's sprawled across my desk asleep. Worst one was when I interviewed for ASM position with a FedEx retail location. I get there 5 to 10 minutes early. They tell me the manager will be with me in a minute. I wait till 5 minutes past the scheduled interview and I ask if everything is okay. They tell me he'll be with me in a minute again. I wait another 5 minutes. I've been there 20 minutes at this point, 10 past the scheduled time. I tell them I understand if he's got a situation. I've been there, but if he would like to reschedule, I'm all for it. At this point he comes out. I get the job and I should have took the interview as a clue. He lied about my responsibilities, tried convincing me to take a lesser position, tried to convince me to relocate to a location twice the driving distance. I had another job offer come up about a week after I started and I took it, gave zero notice, first and only time in my life. He had the audacity to get mad at me. I told him exactly my point of view and he treated it like I was giving up the perfect job. Story 47 It wasn't so bad from my end, but the more the two guys talked about the job the more I didn't want it. This was a security job at a hospital. The two interviewers just acted like tough guys the entire time. I don't know how to fully describe it other than they seemed like they were tough cops rather than just security guards, and I was previously a security guard so I know what the job consists of and have dealt with the want-to-be cops before. Knowing they would be the managers was a big no. A few months later I talked to one of the guards that just happened to be getting food where I was, so I asked him what he thought of the job and his exact words were, "Oh, easily the worst job I've ever had." Story 48 I was interviewed by the two CEO of the company for a senior developer job. They asked me how I ended up in that field as a woman, it upped the interview for me. They also asked me to narrate the plot of the last movie I watched in English to test my professional English in French, and my dumb could not think of a single movie to explain. Story 49. My teenage son got an interview at Walmart. He showed up on time and prepared, but the person he was scheduled to see was absent, so they sent him away. He later got a letter from Walmart saying they would not consider him for future opportunities because he failed to show up for his interview. WTF, he got a better job somewhere else by then anyway. Story 50. A PR position at the Jewish municipality in my hometown, a great gig, but I showed up in a wrinkled shirt, was very insecure, and at the end, the lady asked me, well, why wouldn't we hire one of our own? My grandma was Jewish, but I was too shocked at the time to say anything. Story 51. The interviewer said that she had been doing her job and the role I was applying for due to other staff leaving, so she knew the targets were achievable because she managed to get 13 of the target plus manage herself. Yeah, I wasn't up for micromanagement. Story 52. I turned up high. The bloke interviewing blatantly could tell and mentioned the fact he could smell weed. Asked what my biggest weakness was and I said timekeeping. He burst put laughing and said it takes a lot of confidence to say that in an interview. Needless to say, I didn't get it. Story 53. Third interview company had me meet them in person in early summer 2020 mind you, and tried to bully me into verbally accepting. When I said I wanted to see something in writing they laughed at me for being young, first job out of college, and that no one does contracts anymore. When I asked what the pay would be, CEO said he would have to ask his accountant, but they probably could meet my ask. I said I had to consider my other options. They said they had plenty of interviewees and I didn't have the luxury to ask them to wait, then proceeded to ghost me ill. Kids, if by the third interview your company still has less commitment than that of a Tinder date, stop, drop and roll away ASAP.